Got my glasses.
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome to lesson 3, Unsung Heroines. We're about to sing them because they're whatever. Anyways, this class is a little different than the Glendale one, I think. I just go and I just riff, I just riff. Okay, let's get into it. So today's class we're going to explore 2, maybe 3, because the third one is if we make good time. And if we can't do the third one, then it will be in the appendix. But we'll be doing 2 or 3 stories about women in Jewish history who are considered like extremely like they've really fulfilled, what a Jewish woman is, and like to a very in a very strong way. So before we, hello, Jackie, hello. Speaking of fulfilling what a Jewish woman is, have Jackie. Okay, so I was saving that line for my mother-in-law, but I see she's not here today. So.
Well,
I don't know. We'll find out.
see you tonight.
Okay. She probably forgot. Anyway. Okay. Anyways, so what defines a Jewish, well, first of all, what defines a great woman in general, and what does it mean to be a great Jewish woman? Like what's the how do you do that? So, our starting point is going to be
Our ending point, apparently.
I'm in my own account. I'm not signed in. That's the point. I'm not signed into my account.
Oh, you're in 94.
My wife's computer. No, why am I doing this now? Okay, whatever. So Hashem is delaying us to allow people to come in. Okay, very nice. Okay, now I have access. Okay, so our starting point is the song Eishes Chayil. Eishes Chayil was written. It's part of Proverbs. That was Mishlei was written by King Solomon, and it describes a bunch of it describes the like woman of valor, and that's the song that we sing on Friday nights before Kiddush. We started singing that before Kiddush because it was instituted by Kabbalists, the Rizal, and it's kind of ubiquitous. Everyone does it, really. Sings Eishes Chayil on Friday night because it's talking about a woman of valor, but technically, and according to Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism, Shabbos is connected to the feminine spiritual energy of God. The Shabbos queen. You ever heard that expression? So we sing Eishes Chayil, we're kind of greeting Hashem, and we're like the husband. Hashem is the wife. That's kind of what's going on there. That's why we sing it on Friday nights.
You know this?
Do I know what?
It's a lake.
Oh my gosh.
It's going.
They don't want us talking about women of valor.
There's a leak.
Again or something. I can.
Yeah, you're the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
That's let me see if I can. Why don't you teach?
Okay.
Like, so everybody can.
Okay, the entire class is going to fix the leak, and I'm going to teach to the screen.
You're leaking here.
Yeah, no, it's right there.
Oh, where they're sitting?
Yeah. Okay.
Don't you see on the ceiling? Yeah, but that's over. Yeah, they're here.
Wow. So someone asked for soup for the class, and now we got it.
Oh, we got soup?
No, it's coming out of the ceiling.
Oh.
Sorry. Hey, see, you got excited. You got excited.
That's why I come to class.
Yeah.
They put it right under.
Well, they're just trying to get them more space to sit. But Greg's coming with a garbage can.
Oh, that's
Okay. I'm going to edit this recording. Actually,
Okay.
you got it.
Okay.
Did you just get hit again?
We have many garbage cans. Okay, let's continue. Anyway, so let's talk about Ashes Chayil. So he describes this woman of valor. What's this in this poem basically that we sing? And here you'll hear the rendition. This is the famous rendition of the song. I don't think there's anyone that has a different tune, honestly. What? No, it's from Benzion Schenker. You can pay attention to the words in English. It's over there. So, did you catch any of the characteristics that were described in that song? Did anyone have? Yeah, gives charity. Yeah, yeah. She sells things. She has like business ventures.
But I didn't see her being able to fix a roof. It's a leaky roof.
It could have been implied somewhere in the yeah. No, no, the leaky roof was not included in that.
Speaks wisdom.
Yeah, she says smart things. She's wise. She works hard. I mean, yeah, in general, she's working very hard. Lots of jobs. That's right. Yeah. Maybe she knows how to fix this slideshow. This is my wife's computer. You need to be a Aishas Chayil to use this computer. Anyways. Oh, she is. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell you some of the five things that stuck out in like industriousness, which is what Irv said, or one of you said that she's basically she's making money, she's making things, she's like resourcefulness, same idea, devotion. She's devoted to her family, she's making sure they're warm, she's making sure they're taken care of, and also not just her family, but all these other people, merchants and all sorts of things. Generosity, Jackie said, fear of God at the end. It kind of ends it off that beauty is not, external beauty is not worth anything. What really matters is fear of God ultimately.
I didn't see that.
Oh, it says Sheker Hachein, it's in your book actually on page in your text it's on page, did you say 97, line 30? Line 30. Yeah, in English. Yeah, so even though the other themes were repeated more like frequently, the one about like making clothing and wearing her own clothing and what type of clothing it was and the materials, that was very emphasized. But
Number 30. Oh,
line 30.
yeah.
Yeah.
When was this?
Page 1.
King Solomon, so first temple, long time ago. Yeah. He wrote it. Yeah. Mishlei. Yeah, Shir Hashirim also. No, this is Mishlei.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, for sure. All the Shir Hashirim too. It's like literally a very, it's almost erotic. It's not. It's all an allegory for God, and to speak about God like that is even more, even weirder for that time. So yeah, King David and King Shlomo, like they definitely had their way of describing things.
I'm sorry, you say the Song of Songs
Yeah.
is during which time?
Also, same thing. King. Yeah.
And who?
King David or Shlomo or David. Yeah, Shlomo Melech. Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, let's dig a little deeper, right? We talked about these characteristics. We also had like wisdom and regality, right? That was mentioned also. Beyond traits and characteristics, what is like the essence of like what would be the essence of all of these things? If you were to go to the core of what we're describing here, what a Jewish woman is, like what would it be? And the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to invoke the term that he most often invoked when describing, the essence or the paradigm of a Jewish woman. It was the idea of akeres habayis, which means in English mainstay of the home, foundation of the home, cornerstone of the home. And what that means is that they're the foundation of every individual Jewish home, and collectively they're the bedrock on which the continuity of the Jewish people rests. As we'll see in the stories that we'll see throughout history how Jewish women were really that safety net, that bedrock, that foundation that allowed Judaism to continue in the hardest circumstances. So in the following text, the Rebbe highlights this key role that was played by the matriarchs, which is the imahos, the wives of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. What role they played when we first encountered exile. Our nation first encountered exile. That was when Jacob was living with his treacherous father-in-law for 20 years. So let's see in text 2 how the Rebbe describes the impact of our foremothers. Our forefather Jacob arrived in a foreign land where he endured tough times and trials. Nevertheless, he was not deterred by any difficulties. To the contrary, Jacob successfully established the Jewish people in that foreign environment, with all of his children remaining faithful to the tradition of his forefathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This was, except that they sold their son, but that's just whatever. Okay, I mean they sold their brother. This was only possible thanks to the Jewish mothers, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah and Zilpah. Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah. He's nodding his head because Bilhah and Zilpah are in there, and we never usually include them. But we'll talk about that. Who did everything on their part to ensure the integrity of their home and the future of their people. This is the deeper significance of the concept that the Jewish woman is the mainstay of the home, not only of her individual household, but also of the entire house of Israel. So mainstay of the home doesn't mean in charge of the physical home, right? It means in charge of the spiritual home of the Jewish people. And we have to explain like more of how that plays out. But the Rebbe really broadened the idea of what that is, of this collective home, this sense of home, and we're gonna define this better. They weren't born to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov's family, right? They were not, right? They were Canaani, I guess, or something. I don't think they were part of any. Yeah, and Rachel was part of the family. Leah, obviously, also Rachel and Leah, and Sarah was also Avram's family. So, yeah, Rivka was also. Yeah, Bill and Zilpah were just not. Yeah, that's a good point. Anyways, moving on. Sometimes they're included in the Imahos and sometimes they're not. Usually they're not. I think it's just because it's too long to say all the names. Okay, moving on. The Rebbe then explains why specifically women have that are given that specific focus. Text 3 on page 102. Jewish women have a unique calling to guide others to love and cherish Judaism. This calling begins at home with their own families. Every Jewish woman has the responsibility and obligation to devote herself to the spiritual well-being of her family, using her unique feminine qualities of kindness and compassion. She has the ability to provide the appropriate nurture to each member of her family, guiding them and drawing them closer to Torah. The Baal Shem Tov taught that all Jews are like brothers and sisters belonging to a single family. It is therefore follows that this guidance should extend beyond one's nuclear family until it reaches the entire Jewish people. So first the Rebbe defines where it starts in the home, creating that environment and that strong spiritual nurturing environment in the home, and then you create that home outside also. You bring it out, which is, you see Chabad Shluchos, that's what they're doing. They're basically, everyone's part of their home, whether it's in their house or it's in their shul or it's in their anywhere. That's the idea that it's not something that's confined to their physical location or to their immediate actual family. That's how the Rebbe is kind of broadening it. So the Rebbe is explaining that, that women in general have this unique, these compassionate characteristics of kindness and nurturing and devotion. Now, whenever we make generalizations, people tend to feel like it's a generalization, right? It's lacking nuance and specificity, and it's probably not true, like, a certain percentage of the time. So people are uncomfortable saying things like women are this and men are this, but I would say that it's not when the Rebbe or the Torah or if you see something like this, it's not a haphazard, intellectually lazy attempt to just lump everyone together and make a generalization. It's very different than that. What we're describing here is, if we start the starting point of our understanding of femininity and masculinity and all these things is actually the attributes of God. How the God himself has the aspects of the feminine aspects and the masculine aspects, and we were created in his image. So what we're describing usually is going to be the way that it is in its most in a spiritual sense, in a spiritual form, right? There's a spirit. What is God's femininity? Like what are the aspects of femininity in not the way it is coming down into a human body, but even before that, as what is a feminine soul? What is that? And from there, it plays out in our world as well, right? It's not that we're observing that women are a certain way or men are a certain way, and now we're going to, based on that pattern, we're going to generalize. It's not it. We're basing our rule, our general rule, on what the divine archetype is, what is the divine expression of femininity, and the way it plays out down here, when you have a feminine soul, that's going to be, to some extent, mapped onto that. Now, if someone feels that they're more a different way, or they're more masculine, or yes, there's many variations the way that it can play out. And not everyone's a full expression of this in the most truest sense. But if you talk about the paradigm and the archetype, that's why it's fair to say these types of generalizations, because it's a spiritual concept first. It's a spiritual reality mapped onto a physical. Okay, now that I got that out of the way. Thank you. We're about to be mansplained like you've never seen before. By the way, I was thinking mansplaining when I was saying Eshes Chayil. What is a woman of valor? Let's hear it from King Solomon. But then I realized no, because King Solomon was also describing the same thing as I just said. He was also describing God. The fact that it applies to his wife too, that's very nice and it's very romantic. But he had many, yeah. So some of them, some of his wives, some of them not. As we can read in this Tanakh.
So the trial is really tribute to Hashem then?
Yes, according to the Kabbalists, it's and it makes sense that it has a deeper reading, because there's things in there that are just like, why does he keep repeating the materials that her garments are made out of? And yeah, like, why is that important? And they each correspond to different spiritual things and different levels and all sorts of stuff that you can. The feminine side of Hashem, which is Shabbos, which is why we sing it on Friday night, because we're like the husband coming home after a long day of work, 6 days to be precise, to our wife, and Hashem is sitting there, and we're saying, we're extolling Hashem's beauty and everything, and also our wife, but depending on the day, you can focus on one or the other. Okay, moving on. Okay, so let's now that we defined what we're kind of gonna look for in this okay, so let's talk about a person who we're gonna squeeze into this definition here. Her name is Donya, which is a title. It's not her name, right? Donya means like a don, like what? It's a lady Gracia Nasi. Nasi was her last name. Okay, this is just to set up the context in which she was born. Here's a video describing her background.
As is well known, in 1492, the Jews of Spain were expelled by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. This was the culmination of a long process of discrimination against the Jews. So in 1492, thousands of Jews packed up to leave. It was a very difficult decision. They had lived in Spain for hundreds of years. There had been periods of tremendous prosperity and success, the golden age of Spanish Jewry. And this was a terrible failure. A failure of the royal alliance, of their long-standing connections to the kings, to the royalty. Through service, they worked for the kings, they paid taxes, they were economic assets. They also bribed the kings, but this failed. And in 1492, thousands of Jews left. So where were the Jews meant to go? It was a question. What seemed safest was to go to Portugal. Portugal is the country right next door on the Iberian Peninsula. It had a similar culture, a similar climate. There were lots of family connections between the Spanish Jews and Portuguese Jews. There were lots of business partnerships between Spanish Jews and Portuguese Jews. And so it made the most sense. In fact, the King of Portugal at the time of the Spanish expulsion was inviting the Jews to come to Portugal. He insisted that he was going to honor Jewish activities, Jewish assets, and many of the Jews left, traveled over the mountains into Portugal, and reestablished their lives there. Little did they know that that welcoming tolerance would be very short-lived. In 1497, a new king in Portugal was now in the process of making a peace treaty with Ferdinand and Isabella. King Manuel was trying to marry the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, and therefore he was told by them that Jews of Portugal have to be expelled as well. And so he announced an expulsion of the Jews for Portugal. But he really had little intention to let the Jews go. Imagine how hard it was for those Jews who had risked everything, left their lives, come to Portugal, just barely reestablish themselves. They're actually very motivated to leave Portugal. They come down on the appointed day. The king has promised that there will be ships on the docks to take them out of Portugal, only to discover that this is really a trick, and the king had little intention to let them go. And on the docks, it gets chaotic, and the Jews are forcibly baptized into Christianity. So it's ironic that the Jews who had the most strength to leave Spain and not take the easier route of converting end up being forcibly converted in Portugal. Once the king of Portugal tells the new Christians, which means those Jews who were forcibly converted, that he's not bringing an inquisition, it's pretty clear to everyone that they are going to continue practicing Judaism. It's only once the Inquisition does arrive that you really have to go underground with your Jewish practices. So what would it look like to be a Marrano Jew, a secret Jew? All public activities associated with Judaism would have to be cut out. No going to shul, no public activities and charitable organizations. And so essentially, Judaism goes inside the house. Things that can be done within the home and covered over or obscured in their Jewish origins. So some of the main practices that Marranos would do would be lighting Shabbos candles, setting out clean linen for preparation for Shabbos, cooking Jewish foods before a Yontif, baking matzos in secret. These are just some of the things that Marrano Jews tried to keep in secret. These type of activities were very much the roles of women, and women play a huge role in perpetuating Marrano Judaism. When you think about it, all of the public roles of Judaism that are normally performed by men, going to shul, reading the Torah, running charitable organizations, are no longer available to Marrano Jews. And so within the homes, women had a very strong role. Marrano women are considered by the historians the defenders of the faith. They really are the ones who carry forward.
Just to read some of the primary sources for these events. There's a historian, a chronicler of the time at that time. His name was Shmuel Yuske. I don't know how to say his name, but he chronicled all of these events of Portugal, of when the king had them forcibly baptized when they tried to leave. It was a whole plot. And the way he describes it, we're in text 5 on page 105, starting with the paragraph finally, because we already know what happened. They get to the they get to the port and there's no ships there. There's just the king waiting there the guards, soldiers waiting there to forcibly baptize them. So how did they forcibly baptize them? So he describes it here. Finally, the king commanded that food and drink be withheld from them for 3 days to try them with the anguish of hunger. But this they likewise courageously endured. The king realized that even this was insufficient to change them, and that if he starved them any longer, they would perish. The ellipses is just like last time, horrible torture that they then underwent in order to try to get them. It still didn't work, right? So then they just dragged them by their legs and by their hair and beards, punching and mauling them. His men brought them to the churches where the waters of baptism were thrown upon them. So they just gave up trying to get them to submit, and just like threw some water on them, which happened to me on the train once. This lady was like, she had this rosemary smelling water, and she was just like babbling and spraying it all over the place. And I think she thought she baptized me. I don't know. Maybe I should. I don't. What?
Did she actually?
I was trying to avoid it, but I don't know if I got every drop. If I dodged every drop, hopefully. It's the train, and it's New York. You never know what's going to happen on the train in New York. Yeah. Anyways, as a result of this violence, contrary to divine and human laws, the bodies of many Jews were made Christian, but no stain ever touched their souls. Instead, they kept forever impressed upon them the soul of their ancient law. So basically, these are the people who left Spain, remember? Like, these are very dedicated, and they're being tortured and starved, and they're not going for it. So they're not about to just like start being Christian after they got the water on them. Maybe they thought that would work. I don't know. And they didn't have an inquisition, she said, right? In the beginning, they did not have an inquisition. An inquisition is the process where they have people trying to hunt down secret Jews or any Christian that's practicing a heresy, which is any other non-sanctioned religion, that's going to be a death penalty. So the Inquisition was not there yet. It was in Spain, but not in Portugal. So there were Jews. They were basically hiding their Judaism. That's the way that they chose to live. And it's just remarkable how they sustained this. And now let's get into this. Page 108, you see the family that we're going to be talking about, the Mendes Benaviste family tree. Their real name was Benevence. How do you say this name? Benveniste. That's their name, their Christian name. So everyone in this family tree has multiple names. Okay? They have their Christian name, which is the name that they took when they became Christians, and they have their Jewish name. They were born with their Jewish name. They took their Jewish name when they went somewhere where they were allowed to be openly Jewish. Okay, so and then there's a third name, whatever. We'll not talk about that for a second. Just, there's going to be a bunch of names, so don't worry about it. We'll keep track. Okay, so that was the background of our protagonist, and she was born in 1510, and she was given the Spanish non-Jewish name Beatriz de Luna. Okay, Beatriz de Luna. What does that mean? Do we know what that means?
Luna of the sun.
Yeah, the moon, whatever. Beatrice, that was her name. She was a descendant of a prestigious and wealthy Benevent family from Spain. Her parents left everything behind in Spain, so her family is a family that came from Spain to Portugal, and they were forcibly converted, and that's why she was given the name Beatrice, because she belonged officially to a Christian family. The term for these people there's many terms that are used. One is Moranos, one is conversos. Conversos is more acceptable, but they were called then New Christians by the Christians at the time. They were called New Christians. We don't want to call them that because they're Jews. They're not Christians, but they were called, even by other Christians, New Christians. And they had different ways of handling New Christians because they obviously were always, they're Jews. So the New Christians. So that her family were New Christians. In 1528, Beatriz married her wealthy relative, Francisco Mendes. Okay, very wealthy relative. And Francisco was much older than Beatriz. She was 18 and he was older, which is very common in intra-family marriages of the wealthy. They would marry their uncle, their niece, whatever, and he would be way older. And that was super common when they did these like very aristocratic families. That's what they did. So she would have practiced Judaism as a child back. He was born into like a observant family, but now they were basically Christian on the outside when they were forcibly converted. Francisco was partners with his brother Diogo, and they were incredibly wealthy. We'll see the extent of this wealth in a second. It's really shocking how wealthy they were. And they operated in Spain and Flanders. where they basically controlled the entire spice and pepper import trade of Portugal. So they were the spice merchants of like that whole area, and they're very, very powerful people. And they had very close relationships with the royal family of Portugal and all the European monarchies. So Shmuel Yuske, it describes the experiences of Jews like the Mendez family during this era. In text 6, on page 109, the new Christians had become immersed in power and in deceit and its deceits. They had nearly forgotten their ancient faith and lost the fear of that fountain whence our life flows because of the vast riches and the status and rank they were acquiring in the kingdom. They now felt secure in their imitation of the Christians, though they never exchanged the secret of their souls. Meaning they were pretty comfortable as hidden Jews. They were able to do their stuff at home, and outside they were just regular people in society, integrating fine, and being successful. But he testifies that they never really abandoned their Judaism, which is an amazing thing also, because they're being so successful, and really to many people it would be a nuisance to go home and pretend and like do all your things, and on the outside you have a wonderful life, but in the home you have to hide all these things. So obviously it was real to them and it meant something to them. It wasn't something that they were forced to do by a community or by anything. It was as real as it gets to these people, and that's why that's why someone would go in secret and do it, right? It's an incredible question to ask ourselves, like what would we do? What do we do when no one knows about it? What's our own personal connection that is only us, like only like my own thing that no one else, it has nothing to do with anyone else. It's not because my wife said, it's not because my father says, it's just me. And that's a profound thing that all these Jews had to ask themselves. Yeah.
But I'm just wondering what they had to do in terms of professing their Christianity. Is that
They went to church. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
and
It's horrible.
I bet it's also a problem.
They had no choice.
Yeah, they did.
How?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you don't have to be killed. I mean, you're saying
Well,
you-
that's it.
what? Oh, you're saying there's a concept. No, you're saying there's a concept that people would rather die than say that they accept. But you can go through the motion. I'm saying you can go to church and not say any of that stuff. Can you? I mean, I don't know. It's a good question. Not really. You have to get up and announce things about Jesus and stuff. Like if you,
But you're in front of an idol. You know,
that's debatable.
maybe you are. If you're getting on your knees and on the knee or whatever.
That's a good question, Irv. I think we should parking lot that question, and
Okay, sorry.
no, it's a great question. Yes. No, there's an idea that there were people who rather be burnt than renounce their Judaism. We read about them last week.
That's what
And it's fact that most of these people endured great torture rather than do it. And then they go and live as a Christian. So how does that work? How does that work? It-
You couldn't even put on
yeah. Right.
Those are individuals. We're talking about, what's the population? Few 100,000 Jews?
But these are the same people that refuse to convert. And now, I mean, I guess now they're just living regular lives in Portugal rather than being killed. So it's a good, first of all, it's a good question to ask, from just hear what's the story here, what's going through their mind. If they rather, I mean, in fact, some of the people, I didn't mention this, it was part of the ... Some of the people took their own lives when they were being forced to convert in Portugal. Before they were being tortured. Some of them, they were starving, and they decided that they're done, and they ended it.
But that's suicide.
Yeah.
Isn't that against God's will?
Yes, it is. But in Jewish history, you see it a lot of times. People were suffering and they couldn't handle it anymore, so they couldn't. We read about it on Tisha B'av in the Lamentations. People were doing that. Yeah, and it happened the famous when you go up to that mountain, Masada. Yeah, that was they basically, that was the last stand of the Jewish rebellion, and they all just killed themselves. It's not an ideal thing to do at all. The Torah would not advise that, but that's what they did. Now, why would they choose that over converting? That's a very interesting thing to think about. Yeah, it's off on a tangent, but it's a very what goes through a Jew's mind that he'd rather die by his own hand than convert. Like I don't know. And then when they're forced to convert, some of them, they end up doing things that were basically the same thing. I don't know. But it's a good question. Yeah, that's the good question. Okay, let's move on now. Now that we have that amazing question on the whole thing. Okay. Um, so now we talked about this idea that the Jewish women played a very integral role to preserving whatever semblance of Jewish practice they were able to have. And there was a halachic authority, Rabbi Yom Tov Tzalon. He actually describes the role of the women in Portugal. 100 years later, he talks about the women in Portugal and the effect that they had. You could see it in text 110, text 7 on page 110. The Jewish faith is embedded in the hearts of the righteous women of Portugal. They instruct the men and draw them close to the Jewish faith, as we have heard and witnessed. Why are the men so dependent on the women here? Besides for the fact that there's no sermons going in shul, right? The men are literally, there's no yeshivas, there's nothing. Even the rabbis were left eventually, by the way. A lot of rabbis were allowed to leave Portugal by design. And they and they left. It was not simple to be a religious Jew. So the women who were in touch with the faith and the emunah and the pure simple faith and the love and the just they had that ability to maintain this with tenacity, and that they were feeding it to their family, and that's really what's incredible about that period. Now there was no, as we said, there was no Inquisition yet in the first few decades of the 16th century. But we know that they maintained some Jewish practice, this family, Beatrice's family in Portugal, and they had such a powerful, fabulous wealth that it actually helped them escape some of the times when they got caught being Jewish, Judaizing, what? Yeah, Judaizing. They were basically, I never heard of this verb, but basically being Jewish when it's not allowed. It's called Judaizing, practicing Jewish. Yeah. So they were caught. Diogo was caught in Flanders, and he was arrested. And guess what they do to you when you're arrested in Flanders for being a crypto Jew? They kill you. So he's slated to be killed. Francisco, his brother, writes a letter to the king of Portugal and says, "Hey, my brother's in trouble." In fact, Francisco wrote a letter to all the kings to a whole handful of kings. He wrote to the king of Portugal and his wife. He wrote to King Henry in England, and he wrote to he had a whole Rolodex of friends that he was able to contact. And the letter that you see on page 110 is this incredible letter that the king of Portugal writes to the king of the Netherlands, Flanders, and he's begging him to let him go. He's saying, "This is my closest friend. He makes the point. His motivation is he invested a lot of money in this guy. Okay, he's borrowing money from the king in order to finance his businesses." And obviously, the king makes a lot of money off of these investments, and a lot of his money is tied up in Flanders. And if you confiscate, and they were blocking his wealth, so if you don't release him and his money, the kingdom's gonna fall apart. He invested so much money in them that it was economically dangerous to keep them, to get rid of them. So he was released, summarily released, and you could read that letter on your own. It's a very long and he extols these brothers, talks about him, how Francisco was living there for years, and they're so powerful and so important. It's really cool. Do you have it? Do you have the text? Oh, you don't have it? That's lame.
Maybe it's in the-
Okay. Hopefully it's in the appendix because we don't have so much time to read that letter, but maybe afterwards. Um, especially with all the things that happen. Okay, so um so this document just shows us the power and the prominence of this family in Portugal. Imagine that, I mean, they can literally just, when a Jew is arrested, usually no one hears from him, he disappears. But like this guy, he was able to get kings to write letters. Um, so back in Portugal, just to go back to their life, Beatrice and Francisco had one daughter. Her name was Anna. Um, but Francisco died. This is in 1535, they had Anna, and Francisco died shortly after the baby was born. Interesting to note, his last wish before he died, and this is someone who was living as a Christian for all intents and purposes, he asked to be buried in Jerusalem. This is beautiful. I mean, this is where his heart is. And his wife, as we're about to see, is like legendary and incredible and like the boss of the bosses. And she exhumed his body with permission from the Pope. She wrote to the Pope and bribed him to basically let her take her husband's body and bring it to Venice. That was what she told the Pope. Then she smuggled the body to Jerusalem and buried it in Jerusalem. So she made it happen. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it definitely helps. Okay. So, I mean, she bribed her way out of everything. You'll see. Like she really was running the whole Europe with her money. But, um, anyways, so we have it in the 1530s, basically after Francisco's dead. I'm sorry, like 1536, like a year after Francisco died, the Inquisition was established. Right? They were Manuel, who was the king at the time. He was King Zhao, yeah, King Zhao the Third, right? He was I don't know how to pronounce the name. Yo, really? I have to Jean, Jean. Okay, King Jean said, I'm from New York. I don't know. He said he wrote to the Pope begging him to allow him to have an inquisition, and the Pope has to decide where they're going to have inquisitions. I don't know what it's based on, but he finally got approval for an inquisition in Portugal, and the by the way, that letter that we just talked about, that was written while they were trying to get the Inquisition approved. So
The letter.
right, so he wasn't a friend of the Jews or of the people. It's just he invested a lot of money. Like he needed his money back. It's very simple, you know. So anyways, so they opened the Inquisition, and now you can't live a double life anymore. They'll catch you, they'll torture you, they'll kill you, especially if you're a powerful, wealthy person who has something to lose. You can't do this you can't be there anymore. So 1536, Francisco's dead. A year after his death, that's when the Inquisition started. And they try to bribe a lot and try to really convince, but it didn't. After Francisco died, they kept it at bay until then. And then when he died, they basically put it into effect. Yeah. So we started there's a steady stream of Jewish immigration. But remember, these aren't Jews immigrating, these are Christians. So they have to be very careful how they do it, right? They can't just leave. There were laws depending on the year that said you can't leave if you're a new Christian, because then you would just convert. Jews weren't allowed to leave, right? And if they just convert, then they can leave, right? So that's not what happened. So new Christians weren't allowed to leave, but sometimes they were allowed to leave. So Jews were trying to get out. And sometimes they used it as a proof that you're really a Jew if you're trying to get out, but whatever. So they were very, very careful about it. But Beatrice was also obviously similarly affected. And another interesting development was that her daughter, Anna, inherited half of the fortune because that was the local convention. It was kept in a trust, basically. It was managed by her mother. But the baby daughter is basically having half of this incredible, wealth. And this is like the type of wealth that changes a country. So King Charles wanted how do you say it, Jean? King Jean wanted this wealth. So he decided that he's going to raise baby Anna in his palace. And when she grows up, he's going to marry her. And when I say grow up, I don't mean grow up. and then he's going to get her wealth. That's how wealthy they were. Okay, he wanted half of her wealth, half of their wealth, and Beatrice was like, no, we're not giving my daughter to the palace, even though most of the people in that place would have given anything to have their daughter raised in the palace and then married to a king and be literal royalty, but not a Jew, not someone with a Jewish neshama. Beatrice did not entertain such a thought, and she fled the country. She fled Portugal with her daughter and her fortune, which was very hard to do because her money wasn't liquid. A lot of merchandise. It wasn't easy to leave, right? She was very tied down by her finances. In fact, she couldn't go. She had to go to Antwerp, because so Antwerp was a place where they could still be Christian and Jews and not be caught. It was a little bit more low key. They weren't inquisiting, right? So she went to Antwerp. She couldn't go straight to, right, but they weren't doing the Inquisition there. Right? You're right. It's in Flanders. She had a lot of assets in Flanders also, but she didn't yet have access to all of the assets, so she couldn't leave. She couldn't go to a fully much more openly Jewish place, which is interesting and questionable because, like, Irv raised this issue. How could someone live as a Christian voluntarily, right? If they have the option to go to a country where they can live as a Jew, which would be like Italy, or in Italy they were able to in the ghetto, in the Venetian ghetto or whatever, they were able to live in as a Jew. So I thought about that, and I realized when you see what she does with her money, you'll realize very soon that this was not something that she wanted to do for her own comfort. She needed this money. The Jewish people needed this money, and she couldn't just be like, okay, yeah, let all my power and all my wealth just go to the dogs, and I'll have a nice happy Jewish life somewhere. She sacrificed herself spiritually for the good of the Jewish people, and that's a very hard thing to do, and I think that's why she did it. But anyways, and she was very pressured to concede to this plan for her daughter to marry the king. Obviously, he wanted that money. I don't know why he couldn't just kill her and take it. It's very interesting that they really keep the laws over there. I guess she was very powerful. It would have made a big issue. But so they're in Antwerp. Now, we're not reading it. I'm reading inside right now, even though it seems like it. But Beatrice's sister. Okay, then we have in Antwerp Beatrice's sister. The whole family went to Antwerp, by the way, not just her. And so Beatrice's sister, Brianda, married Diogo, her uncle. And this happens a lot. They marry each other's uncle. They marry their uncles. Okay, and they had a baby also named Beatrice. Okay, like her aunt. But Diogo also died shortly after he got married. So the same pattern. Francisco married, baby shortly after. Okay. But in his will, he left his money, right? The other half of the Francisco, he was a partner of Francisco. He left his money to who? Beatrice. Exactly. He did not leave it to his wife, which, not for today's class, is a fascinating legal battle that ensued. Very fascinating with the right guy who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, Joseph Cairo. He was involved in it. It's very interesting. We can't do that now, but she won. Anyways, Beatrice. Okay, so her wealth is skyrocketing. Antwerp became unsafe in 1544. So because they were starting to crack down on Judaizing, yeah, Judaizing, and now. Right? And now King Charles V wanted Anna also. Everyone's chasing Anna, the daughter. They want her money. So they're like, when are we going to get this girl? She's literally our lottery ticket. So they have to run again. And they come to Venice. And they lived as Christians in Venice because they still had assets in Antwerp. They could have lived as Jews in the Venetian ghetto. But if they would have exposed themselves, then all of their assets in Antwerp would be confiscated. So they needed to stay Christian so that until they could liquidate and get their stuff out of Antwerp. Very interesting. Anyways, now finally they're home free. They're able to be Jewish. After they get their money out, Her family is now openly Jewish. They're living in Venice, and they all take Jewish names. Actually, they moved to Ferrara, okay, in 1548, and in Italy, and they openly embraced Judaism. And so Beatrice became Chana. But in Spanish, they went by Gracia, right? Is that pronounced right? How do you, Gracia? It means grace. Chana means grace, right? Gracia? Okay. And which is the Spanish equivalent. So Gracia, grace, Chana. Very, okay. And then her daughter became Reina, which is a very common Spanish name, but also a Jewish name. Okay. Anna was Reina. And her nephew, Yon, became Yosef. So much more normal. And the family adopted the name Nasi. Also interesting. Her name, she made her own last name now. Like she's the patriarch. She's the patriarch of the family. Yeah, Nasi means a prince, like the head of the Jewish people. I don't know, but she definitely had the money to back it up. Anyways, so she went by Doña Garcia, and her great wealth was used to bolster the Jewish people in a major way, right? She assisted thousands of Jewish Portuguese refugees, right? She was the one who provided shelter, sustenance, all the support that a refugee needed who was escaping Jewish persecution. She set them up in places where they were more friendly to Jewish people. She shipped them wherever they needed to go. She provided them the food that they needed and even the education. She really cared for the Jews, to these Moranos, to the conversos. She cared about them very, very well. And you see this. It was written also by Shmuel Uske on page 111, text 8. Has God's mercy ever appeared to anyone in human garb? That's an interesting thing he's saying. Basically, he's saying she's so compassionate and so amazing that she's like, it's like an embodiment of God's mercy. Also interesting line to say in a Christian context. Has God's mercy ever appeared to anyone in human garb? Like, it's never happened before. Like, basically saying, there's whatever, no Jesus. It has appeared to you to help you with your troubles. Has anyone ever seen a woman risk her life to save her brethren, as if she inherited Miriam's innate compassion, Miriam the prophetess in the Torah, or govern her people with Deborah's remarkable prudences? This is Deborah who led the military. She was the king basically of she was the queen of the Jewish people. Before we had kings and queens, we had these judges. So in Judges, Deborah was the leader of the Jewish people, and she fought the battles. In fact, Israel's current battle, called Gideon's Chariots, the current name of the operation of conquering Gaza, that's the war that Deborah led. But anyways, yeah. So or aid the persecuted with Esther's boundless virtue. He's quoting Esther also. Esther was the hero of the Inquisition period because she was the person who lived secretly in the king's palace as a Jew. So she was like the person that, in the Inquisition files, most Jewish people were caught. They were very much valued Purim. That was their holiday that they really connected to. Purim and the fast of Esther. Esther was like the hero. So or free the besieged from anguish, like the chaste and generous widow, Judith, a woman of true-hearted courage. Jewish Judith is in the story of Yehudis of Hanukkah. In the Hanukkah story, she was instrumental in the Greeks being defeated because she killed one of the generals, and that's why we say that women have a special Hanukkah. They're not supposed to work or do any labor or anything like that because it's they made the miracle. So, the Lord has sent you such a woman in our own days from the supreme choir of his hosts. He has treasured all these virtues in a single soul. To your happy fortune, he chose to infuse them in the delicate and chaste person of the blessed Jewess Gracia Nasi. Her inspiration greatly encouraged your needy children in Portugal, who were too poor and weak to leave the fire and to undertake a lengthy journey. She basically got people to leave. She inspired people to leave their homes in Portugal to come to better places where they could be openly Jewish and where she's basically building the Jewish people. She's finding people who are living very suboptimal lives as Jews, and she's schlepping them out, funding the whole thing, smuggling them, doing whatever she needs to do, and then establishing them in Ferrara or in other places. And you'll see she has an even bigger plan that what she's going to do next. She generously provided money and other needs and comforts to the refugees who arrived destitute, seasick, and stuporous in Flanders and elsewhere. She helped them overcome the rigors of the craggy Alps in Germany and other lands. She hastened to alleviate the miseries caused by the hardships and the hazards of the long journey. You know, many other people, refugees, people tried to rip them off and profit off of them and try to, to take advantage of their and charge them exorbitant sums to get them to a safer place. And she was paying for it and just it's just a beautiful thing. This, with her golden hand and angelic purpose, she lifted the majority of our people in Europe from the abyss of this hardship and countless others, where poverty and sin had hurled them. She continued to guide them until they were in safe lands, and until she had returned them to the obedience and the precepts of their ancient God. So she took it as her personal mission to revive Judaism single-handedly. I mean, that's an incredible. She could have easily just been like, "Hey, I'm literally the queen of the world. I could do whatever I want. I could, what was burning inside of her that she took this mission on to bolster, to build Judaism, and she could have lost everything doing that. Someone could have decided, she messed with the wrong Christian or the Pope or whatever. This lady's causing you problems, and she didn't. She looked death in the face and she gave it all. And the author invoked all the biblical personalities and talked about each quality of them. There's a whole class on each of these personalities, what we can learn from them. But he said that she embodied all of them at once. She also sponsored an incredible thing, which is the Ferrara Bible. This is a Bible that was translated into Ladino so that these people who only ever read the Christian Bible, they've never read a Jewish Bible. Imagine these people still identify as Jewish. They still do their little practices and their little customs at home. They never read a Chumash, they never read a Torah. They come and she gives them a Ladino Bible, something that they can understand and read. And she funded the whole thing, which is an incredible thing. And it's dedicated to her. The front page says, to the most magnificent lady, Doña Gracia Nasi. If you want to donate some books, I will write that in the cover for you. After a few years in Ferrara, the family moved to Istanbul, to Constantinople, okay, in the Ottoman Empire. I guess it was friendlier there. Gracia's nephew was Jean, and now his name is Yosef Nasi. He married Gracia's daughter Anna, which is Reina. So he got the last laugh, right? We were wondering who's gonna marry Anna in the end. It wasn't the king, it wasn't anybody, it was her nephew. Okay, surprise. So her nephew marries her daughter, and her nephew becomes like one of the most powerful people in Constantinople because the Sultan appointed him as a duke, the Duke of Naxos, and there's a bunch written about this character. His name is Don Yosef Nasi. We're not going to go into him, but because this is about his aunt, but he is an extremely powerful person in the Muslim world also. Very close to the Sultan. Then we can read an account here of how they were viewed, by the way, by this German merchant named Hans Dernschwam. How do you say that, Bezalel? Dernschwam. And he did business in Constantinople during this period, and he described the family. Now, this guy did not like Jews, right? And he especially didn't like Jews like Gracia. He thought they were nuts. He thought they were generous to the point of ridiculousness, and he thought that their whole thing was a scam. Let's read what he wrote. Page 113, text 9. In 1553, the old Portuguese woman, Gracia Mendecia Nasi, came to Constantinople from Venice with her daughter and servants. The Jews are very proud of her. All call her a senora. She lives also in luxury and extravagance and has many servants, maids also, among them 2 from the Netherlands. Those are very expensive. She is said to have been formerly a Marano, and here to have become a Jewess again. The Signora, whom have mentioned, and her son-in-law here, and his son-in-law live in such in such state that it would amply befit a prince. They feed about 80 people a day. They must have cheated people somewhere. He's like, this can't be real. They're feeding all these people. There's something going on. It's a front. Something must be wrong with them. They 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 allege that they have left a lot of wealth behind them. Also, that some is following them in the sea. And considering the cost of living in Turkey, their wealth will soon shrink here. Basically, they're wasting all their money and they're on other people. They gave the pashas and a lot and distributed several thousand ducats to the poor Jews or their hospital. So he's basically saying they're wasting all their money on other people, and it's like it makes no sense because they're going to run out of money. I don't think she ever did run out of money, but and her son-in-law were basically running the business together, and they sponsored all the yeshivas and all the shuls, the synagogues. They all had her name on it, and all the ex-conversos across the Mediterranean. And she also conducted international diplomacy on their behalf. There's an incident. There's a lot of incidents, but there's one incident that I saw that there was some Jews executed in a city in Italy. They executed some Jews for practicing Judaism, and she lobbied to boycott that port, that city, so no merchants would go there, and the boycott lasted for a bit, eventually died out. But that was her power. She would wield her influence for her people, which is a dangerous thing also to do if she's still pretending to be a Christian. And then she comes with this very ambitious project, which is very revolutionary at the time. She bought a city in Israel, Tiberia, from the Sultan. Okay, probably wasn't cheap, and it's a port city. And she bought this so that she can settle Jews there, which is part of her whole thing, right? She's taking Jews from oppression and resettling them in places that are better. So now she just bought a city for them. And she renovated the place. She built infrastructure. She built all the things that you need. And she's starting to ship people to Tiberias. And the plan was for her to move there too and to set up her empire in Tiberias. But this is a very, very interesting project because from the time that the second temple was destroyed and the Jews went into exile, there was no project to go and settle Israel. People lived there. There were a few hundred Jews here and there, and they had land and whatever. But there wasn't let's go migrate from Europe to Israel. That was not a thing. As individual, you're saying to set up a whole community and things? Yeah, right. There was always a push. There were push for small communities and things like that. But there wasn't this idea of let's move large swaths of European Jews to a city, and we're gonna take over the city and own it. That's the key point. The Vilna Gaon did not buy a city; he bought some land. And the same thing with Chabad, Hebron. We bought Hebron. We bought. It was very important for Jewish leaders to buy things in Israel. That's true in general. They used to buy a synagogue or a plot of land or farms land and things like that. But this was a actual settlement goal, to actually have our own land. It's a very interesting thing, and people actually saw this as a precursor of Mashiach coming. 1565, where hundreds of Jews went and moved. Now, it makes sense that it wasn't that many Jews because it's not the easiest place to live, and they were probably okay where they were. They weren't about to go be okay, we have to go run to Israel now. It'd be nice if they would have, but that's not. It didn't seem like that's what happened. In fact, the whole project fell apart when she died. And her son-in-law took it over, but eventually just petered out. No one really took the opportunity. And I'm curious, I didn't look into this, but who owns the city? I guess it was a temporary lease. I don't think she actually owned the city. I think she got the rights to it from the Sultan, but I don't think it was forever. I don't know. I didn't see that. It's interesting. I don't know what the technicalities of that.
Potential tax, so
She had to pay the tax. Yeah,
that's not being paid. Probably pretty bad.
that makes sense. That's a good point. But if someone was paying the tax till now, maybe we could still have that city. That would be cool. Anyway, so it's fun. It's interesting to see this as they saw it as like such an interesting development. Such a momentous development. They thought Mashiach was coming. In text 114, you see that they're describing that. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you could see that he's describing the reaction to it. They saw that maybe this means that Mashiach is coming. It didn't mean that this was a stage that in Mashiach's coming. It's a very big difference. Because we go to Israel does not mean that Mashiach is here. It's opening the door to what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. So for them, it was like, whoa, we're going back to Israel. We can go, So obviously, all the more so now that we can go back to Israel, doesn't mean Mashiach's here. It means that there's a big step, a big doorway to that. Okay. Anyways, when Gracia died in Constantinople, we don't know why, but she never made it to Israel. She was supposed to go there. She never made it. Maybe she was ill, but she died. She passed away in 1569, and she was mourned across the entire Jewish world, as we can understand. She was eulogized as the matriarch of the Portuguese and ex-converso diaspora, and she was depicted as the paragon of Eishes Chayil. That's how that was the epitome of how they described her. In fact, there's a major scholar from the time. His name is Rabbi Moshe Titrani, otherwise known as the Mabit, right? The Mabit was a contemporary of the Yosef Cairo, the Shulchan Aruch. This is the time period that we're in. Major Jewish law scholars. He played on words with Eishes Chayil, and I love this one because I'm going to do it because I have a Chana also at home. He says, Rabos banos ose Chayil, v'chana also al kulana. Instead of saying ve'at also al kulana, meaning he's saying many women have performed worthily, but you surpass them all. That's the regular sentence. But instead of you, he says, but Chana surpasses them all. It's a play on words. It rhymes. It fits in the sentence. But you can say any woman's name. You can just stick it in. It's a fun thing to do, I guess. You could say but that's how they described her, like that she was the epitome of it. And then you see there's a coin, a medal. That's not her. That's her niece, also Danya Garcia. Right, she had the same name, Garcia. And so on page 115, that medal is her. So you see in her remarkable life, someone who gave their life in the fullest, gave their money in the fullest, gave their everything for the Jewish people. They were single-handedly responsible for the survival of the Jewish people. And she, at the same time, she's a tremendous Eishes Chayil. Her faith and her neshama that she was imbuing everyone with. She was nurturing the Jewish soul, right? As we described. That's what she did.
You did all the travel was all by boat from
Sure.
Portugal to everywhere else.
Sure. Text 12, by the way, the Rebbe summarizes this concept, this idea. He puts it very well, and it fits very nicely with Danya Garcia's life. The way that the Rebbe describes the unique abilities of Jewish women. Text 12 on page 116. The inner spark of Jewish consciousness, the Pintel Yid, is present and complete in all Jews, regardless of their external conditions or circumstances. However, we must work to awaken this inner core within ourselves and others, so that it should become revealed, influencing and guiding all the particulars of daily life. Jewish women play a particularly important role in this task because divine providence has endowed Jewish women with the special qualities and abilities to achieve this. Women are endowed with greater and more expressive qualities of sensitivity and warmth. They're therefore best suited to awaken and evoke the innate inner feelings that every Jew possesses, love for God, love for the Torah, and love for fellow Jews. This idea of bringing out someone's potential, that's the whole idea of chinuch, nurturing. It's not to transform someone from the top down and to tell them how to be, but it's to unlock and show them how to bring out who they are. And that's all these Jews who are hidden and they don't know anything about Judaism. She really showed them who they were by taking them under her wing. We'll do our second one, and I'll have to do it quickly because we're going really over. But I'll do it. I'll do it the second one. The second, she's a very phenomenal character, Rebbetzin Bela Katz. Who has heard of Rebbetzin Bela Katz? Okay, Bela Katz. She was shifting from Sephardic Jewry to Ashkenazic Jewry, and she was. You see, Danya Garcia was a remarkable philanthropist and supported the Torah and the scholars, but Bela was an actual scholar in her own right, which is really, really rare because Jewish women were not prioritized for education. They were more literate than anybody else at the time, but meaning they knew how to read Yiddish and everything. They usually didn't learn Hebrew, but if they were wealthy, they ended up learning more. So Bela Katz was born into a very wealthy family. She got all the education. Usually only one son got an education. The rest of the sons went to work on the farm, and never mind the daughters. But Bela got a very high quality education. Her father was someone named he wrote Rabbi Yeshua Falk Katz. He's one of the biggest authors, one of the biggest commentaries in Jewish law. He wrote the Drisha and the Prisha and the Sma. If you're learning any Jewish law, you're going to learn those books as well. They're in the Shulchan Aruch on the bottom of the page. So he's, well, maybe in the back, depending on the edition. But he was a very big scholar, and he taught his daughter, and his daughter actually was also a big scholar. In the introduction to this book, this halachic manuscript called Drisha and Prisha, the son of the author writes about his mother because his mother was so impressive, and he needed to have her memory recorded to record who she was and what she did. So what did he write about her? Let's read in text 13. I'm not going to read everything. He writes about how her radiance and her splendor were not ours alone. She shared it with everyone else, and she's just an incredible person. Actually, let's go to text. He talks about all the amazing things that she rejected all physical pleasure. She didn't care for money or comfort. She gave everything away to the poor. That's what he writes about his mother. Then he talks about her daily schedule. Page 121, text 14. Interesting daily schedule. All of her days, both in winter and summer, she always rose early, several hours before dawn, and prayed at length with great devotion. She held the key to the women's section of the synagogue and was the first to arrive and the last to leave. She would remain in the synagogue 1 or 2 hours after everyone had left, completing her prayers and supplications. After her prayers, she did not indulge in any idle matters. She went on to study Torah, reading the weekly Torah portion with Rashi's commentary, as well as other commentaries. This is all well known to any of my father's students who ate at our table. Whenever they discussed Torah matters at the meal, she would join the discussion, like one of the students. She would occasionally come up with original interpretations that were as sweet as honey. She was especially knowledgeable in the laws pertaining to women, which are highly, highly, highly complex. She always devoted her mind and heart to understanding the reasons behind the Torah's laws. So she was extremely dedicated to prayer and everything, and she also got ill from fasting. She fasted a lot. She was very, very devout. So this wasn't a normal thing back then at all. Now, if you see someone like this that's a woman, you would be like, okay, that makes sense. Because nowadays, women do. The Rebbe and everybody else realized that women need to be educated on the highest level in Torah. Just like everyone, if we have the opportunity, we have to do it. So it's not as surprising. But back then, it was really unique. There's a whole list in the appendix of women who were like this, who achieved very high levels in this way in history, but they're the exception, not the rule. So one of the interesting halachic innovations that she made, she had a halachic opinion that by the way, a lot of halachic writings have secret insertions from their wives and their daughters. Oh, sorry, Jewish law. I'm sorry. Yeah. Jewish law. There's a lot of there's like Rashi. There's a Rashi that writes that he asked his daughter something. Yeah. It might be a misprint, but he asks his daughter things. And in this work as well, there are references to to like allusions to this fact. I don't have time to get into why it has to be hidden and why it has to, it's a whole thing. But she actually had an innovative, she had an issue with the way women are making the blessing on the Shabbat candles. If you make blessing on the Shabbat candles, you make the blessing, right? I'm sorry, you light the candles first, and then you cover your eyes, and then you make the blessing. Why do we do that? Because every mitzvah, you make the blessing before you do it. It's an introduction to the mitzvah. You have to, but by candles, if you make the blessing, it's gonna be Shabbos technically, because you're saying that you're lighting the Shabbos candles. So when you make the blessing, it's considered Shabbos, and now it's questionable, it's problematic to light Shabbos candles on Shabbos. You have to light them before Shabbos. So we say, make the blessing after you light, but then you don't have the whole concept of making the blessing before the mitzvah. So cover your eyes. When you cover your eyes and make the blessing, now it can be as if the candles aren't really there. Open your eyes, now it's there, and now you can do it. But Bela had an issue. On holidays, Yom Tov, you're allowed to light candles, even on the Yom Tov. So why do you do the same thing? Why do you do this whole thing with the covering the eyes on Yom Tov? Just make the blessing first. Who cares that it's Yom Tov? Because you're allowed to light on Yom Tov. Make the blessing, and then light the candles. Why are you doing the shenanigans that you do on Shabbos? So that's what Bela's issue was. And she used to tell women, stop it. You don't know what you're doing. And her husband, not her husband, there are many halachic authorities that actually agreed with her and said that you should follow her way of doing things. But the other ones, first of all, always stick to their customs. This is the custom. We're sticking to it. We're not changing. You have a very good theory. We're not changing it. And regardless of that, it's going to confuse people. It's going to confuse people really badly. So just keep it simple and just do it regular. So Bela, you're right, but it's not really practical to differentiate. But Bela, her mind was so nuanced that it bothered her to not differentiate. So that's what kind of person she was. It wasn't just, and she also gave other halachic advice that we don't have time to get into. She was obviously a brilliant person. She also had a very strict regimen of, you can see on page 124, text 17, after she did all of her Torah study and all of her prayer, then she went and engaged in acts of kindness. She visited the sick. She comforted mourners. There was no mitzvah in the city that she did not involve herself. And she had, when she still had time in the day, she made tzitzis. She made all sorts of things. And she dealt with the kids and supervised the household and the grandchildren and the students and all this stuff. She did it all. Sounds like a Chabad woman here. And she had no trace of haughtiness and exceedingly generous with charity, even beyond her means. All of her thoughts and deeds were focused on finding a mitzvah to perform. This is all from her son writing this about her in the introduction to this halachic work that I read when I was doing my rabbinical studies. I read this, and then I had a theory that she really wrote the whole book, and it was a cover up. Anyways, so just summarizing here because I don't. So yeah. So she was widowed at age 41, and then she made Aliyah. She went to Israel and dedicated the rest of her life to studying prayer and charity. So now she's like single and she's like living a very holy life. And then she passed away at 58 and is buried on Har Hazesim, the Mount of Olives, which is a very big holy thing. Yeah, and she really exemplified these qualities.
Lesson 3, Unsung Heroines. Narratives. 1. Dona Gracia was born in Portugal in the early 16th century to a family that had been forced to convert to Christianity, but had continued practicing Judaism clandestinely. After fleeing Portugal and openly embracing Judaism, Dona Gracia used her enormous fortune to help her fellow Portuguese Jews escape. She helped the refugees reestablish themselves financially and bankrolled institutions and publications to fully restore their Jewish faith and practice. 2. Rebbetzin Bela Katz lived in Lviv in the 16th and 17th centuries. Her husband, Rabbi Yehoshua Falk Katz, was a leading halachic authority. Rebbetzin Bela maintained a busy daily schedule of prayer, Torah study, family and household maintenance, and communal activism. A scholar in her own right, she proposed halachic opinions that are highly regarded by halachic authorities. General points. 1. Historically, Jewish women have been considered the mainstays of their homes and communities, and they played unique roles in nurturing the Jewish family, community, and faith. 2. The classic Woman of Valor song from Proverbs ascribes 5 prominent characteristics to the ideal Jewish woman: industriousness, resourcefulness, devotion, generosity, and awe of God.
Next week, heroes and hostages. All right, thank you for joining here.
Why would they just say of God and not love of God? It says the two sides of